Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Seraphine Bramblevine had spent 17 years protecting Prince Lucivar Nightcrown's beautiful face, and it took him less than 17 seconds to pretend none of it had mattered. The Hall of 12 Moons was full when he rejected her. Every alpha family in the kingdom stood beneath the silver arches. Noble women wore heavy velvet gowns embroidered with pack crests. Warriors in formal armor lined the walls. At the far end of the hall, the empty black throne of the Alpha King waited beneath a crown carved from moonstone. His younger brother stood on the lower dais in white and gold, handsome enough to make half the court forgive him before he had even committed the offense. Seraphine had always loved that face. When they were children, Lucivar's fine bones and long gold-brown hair had made him look too delicate for the wrestling yard. Other boys had noticed. They had pushed him into mud, taken his boots, and called him a lamb born in a wolf's den. Seraphine, already stronger than boys twice her age, had put all three tormentors into a horse trough and asked Lucivar whether his nose had been damaged. He had stared at her with wet gray eyes and said no. "Good," she had told him. "I like your nose." For years after that, she had stood between him and every fist, insult, and cruel joke. When he grew taller and learned to fight, she trained with him. When his first shift left him feverish, she carried him 3 miles through snow to the healers. When he was afraid to speak before the Southern Pack Council, she sat in the first row and smiled until he remembered every word. She had pursued him openly. She had given him crooked protective charms and praised his hair with an honesty that made him blush. He had accepted her attention, held her hand in private, and once promised that no one would ever make her stand alone in a crowded hall. Now he stood in that very hall and looked through her as if she were an inconvenient pillar. "Lady Seraphine," Lucivar said, loud enough for every noble to hear, "there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. I have never made a formal mating vow to you." A ripple of whispers crossed the chamber. Seraphine's right hand tightened around the small velvet box she had brought as a gift. Inside it rested the first magic sphere she had ever kept stable for more than a minute. It was no larger than a plum, silver blue and dense enough to crack a stone floor if she lost control. She had practiced for 6 months because she wanted to show Lucivar that her mother's explanation had been true. Her magic was not absent, it was compressed. Lucivar knew that. He had heard her mother explain it when they were children. He had watched Seraphine rise before dawn to train, watched wands split in her grip, watched spells collapse into heavy little balls that rolled through classrooms and shattered furniture. He had told her he believed her. Today, beside him stood Caldrissa Valahart, a highborn witch whose flame magic could fill a ballroom ceiling with golden birds. Caldrissa was lovely in a dark red gown, but her mouth was tense. She did not look at Seraphine. Lucivar continued. "The Southern Territories require a Luna whose magic is already proven. Lady Caldrissa has agreed to stand beside me." Someone near the musicians laughed. "Proven," an older noblewoman repeated. "A practical requirement. One cannot lift a curse by lifting the table." More laughter followed. Seraphine heard the words clearly. She also heard the faint crack inside the velvet box as her magic sphere grew heavier. She had explained herself for years. She had explained that her mother, Mevrian Bramblevane, had never lied about her potential. She had explained that dense magic matured differently. She had explained that strength was not a shameful substitute for witchcraft, but another gift entirely. No one who mocked her had ever wanted an explanation, so she did not give one. "Return the pearl clasp," Lucivar said. His voice lowered, as if gentleness could make the demand less public. "It belonged to my grandmother." Seraphine touched the clasp at her collar. He had fastened it there 2 winters ago after kissing her forehead beneath the old bell tower. He had said it suited the woman who would one day wear his colors. Her chest hurt, not theatrically, not in a way that could be answered with a clever sentence. It hurt with the quiet weight of every morning she had believed they were walking toward the same future. She removed the clasp and crossed the polished floor. Lucivar held out his palm. She set the pearl into it. "You are correct," she said. "You never made a formal mating vow." Relief touched his handsome face too quickly. Seraphine looked at him and remembered a thin boy hiding behind her shoulder. She remembered his hand in hers. She remembered how many times she had defended his courage before he had found it for himself. "But when Lord Petavar put you in a feed barrel at 13, she added, "you promised never to let anyone humiliate me in public." A few people stopped smiling. Lucivar's face tightened. "This is not the time for childhood stories." "No," Seraphine agreed. "Your memory is not as pretty as your face. I should have noticed sooner." The first genuine laugh came from one of the guards. He turned it into a cough when Lucivar glared at him. Seraphine closed the velvet box, slipped it into her pocket, and stepped toward the ceremonial chair on which Lucivar had been sitting before the announcement. It was an absurd object, built from black oak and plated with silver wolves. Her mother had reinforced its legs after Lucivar cracked it during his first uncontrolled shift. Lucivar frowned. "What are you doing?" "Returning another family possession." She grasped the chair beneath both arms. Lucivar had time to look confused before Seraphine lifted the entire chair with him still in it. The Hall of 12 Moons fell silent. She raised him high enough that his boots swung above the floor, turned carefully, and carried him down the center aisle. Lucivar grabbed the carved arms. "Seraphine, put me down." "I intend to." Inside the hall. That detail was not specified. The nearest courtiers scattered. One elderly matron clutched her jeweled cane and laughed so hard she had to lean on a column. Caldrissa covered her mouth. Seraphine could not tell whether she was shocked or trying not to smile. At the open bronze doors, Seraphine set the chair on the outer landing with perfect care. Lucivar remained seated, red-faced and speechless. "Since you do not require my future," she said, "you probably do not require my mother's reinforced furniture either." A low voice behind her said, "Leave the chair, bring the woman back." The command did not need to be loud. Every wolf in the hall felt it. Seraphine turned. The Alpha King had entered through the northern doors without fanfare. Valar Nightcrown wore black silver armor beneath a heavy winter cloak. No skin showed below his throat. His dark hair brushed the collar of his armor, and a thin scar crossed one eyebrow without diminishing the severe balance of his face. He was broader than Lucivar, taller than any man near him, and carried the contained stillness of someone who had never needed to perform strength for a room. Seraphine's grief did something deeply disrespectful. It paused. Her gaze moved from his face to the armored line of his shoulders, then returned to his face because she had standards and intended to examine the better feature twice. Valar stopped 3 paces away. His eyes were a cold, unusual blue. They met hers directly. "Have you finished looking?" he asked. Seraphine considered lying. Her mother had raised her better. "No, Your Majesty, but this appears to be a formal moment, so I can continue later." A shocked sound moved through the court. The king's mouth did not smile, exactly. One corner merely reconsidered its position. He looked past her to Lucivar on the landing. "You received her loyalty for 17 years. Lucivar rose from the chair. "Brother, I can explain. That privilege was available before you invited 12 packs to watch you disgrace her. The Southern Council requires a proven Luna." Valar's gaze returned to Seraphine. "Did you ask her to prove herself today?" Lucivar hesitated. Seraphine answered for him. "No, he asked for his grandmother's clasp." "Efficient," Valar said. "Cowardly, but efficient." Lucivar's jaw hardened. "You have been away at war. You do not understand the pressure here." "I understand pressure. It is the thing that reveals structure. You appear decorative." The guard who had coughed before abruptly studied the ceiling. Valar removed his winter cloak. The heavy black fabric was lined in silver, and fastened with the royal wolf crown. He placed it around Seraphine's shoulders. It smelled of cold air, cedar, and the iron halls of the northern fortress. The gesture was protective, but not possessive. He did not touch her throat or pull her against him. He simply made it impossible for anyone in the room to pretend she stood alone. "She has explained her magic for years," Valor said to the court. "You chose not to believe her. That is a failure of your judgment, not of her truth." Seraphine looked up at him. He was even more unfair from this distance. Without turning, he murmured, "Now is still not the time to inspect me." "You are standing very close," she murmured back. "I am being challenged by circumstances." This time she saw the brief movement at the corner of his mouth. Then he faced the hall. "Lucivar has rejected Lady Seraphine Bramblevane. He is free to live with that decision." Caldrissa finally looked at Seraphine. There was relief in her expression, but also shame. Valor's voice deepened. "I claim her under the crown's right of open choice, not as property, not as consolation, as the woman I intend to court before every pack that mocked her." The words struck the hall harder than a roar. Lucivar went pale. Seraphine stared at the king. "You intend to court me?" "Yes." "Because I carried your brother outside?" That improved the morning. It did not create my interest. "How long have you been interested?" "This is still a formal moment." She narrowed her eyes. "Convenient. You may interrogate me later." On the outer landing, Lucivar took one step toward them. "Seraphine, do not turn this into revenge." She looked at the man she had loved. The pain returned. It did not disappear because his brother was more handsome. Her heart was not a plate one could replace with a better plate. She had dreamed of Lucivar's hand in hers at this ceremony. She had believed he would be proud of her even before her magic awakened. But when she looked at him now, she also saw what he had chosen. Applause from people who had never carried him through snow, approval from nobles who had laughed when he was weak, and the comfort of a woman whose talents required no courage to defend. "I am not doing anything for revenge," Seraphine said. "For the first time today, I am considering something for myself." Valor extended his hand. He did not command her to take it. She studied his gauntleted fingers, then his face, then his shoulders again, because emotional injury had not made her blind. "If I accept your courtship," she said, "I am not agreeing to become queen." "Correct. I will continue training. I would be disappointed if you stopped. And if someone insults my mother, I may fight them. Warn the floor stewards first. They have requested fewer broken tables." Mevrienne Bramblevane's voice came from the rear of the hall. "She only broke 3 last year." Seraphine's mother walked between the nobles in a dark blue high-collared gown, her silver-streaked hair braided down her back. She was not tall, but the court made space for her as if she carried a storm beneath her skin. Mevrienne stopped beside her daughter and examined Lucivar outside with his displaced chair. "You did not strike his face?" she asked. "It was a formal occasion." "Excellent restraint." Then Mevrienne looked at Valor. "My daughter is not a prize you won by arriving at the correct dramatic moment." "I know. She has loved your brother." Valor's expression did not change, but a colder light entered his eyes. "I know that too. She may continue to grieve him even while she finds you attractive." Seraphine closed her eyes. "Mother." "You were staring." "I was wounded." "Not in the eyes." A laugh escaped Caldrissa before she could stop it. Mevrienne turned toward the sound. Caldrissa straightened, expecting rebuke. Instead, the older witch said, "At least one person beside my daughter is honest today." Valor kept his hand extended. Seraphine placed hers in it. His gauntlet was cool. His grip was careful, far gentler than a man of his size needed to be. For one heartbeat, his thumb moved over her knuckles, a quiet touch hidden by the folds of his cloak. The court saw a king claim a rejected witch. Seraphine felt something more dangerous. He was not rescuing her from humiliation. She had already carried the humiliation outside on its own chair. He was choosing to stand beside her after seeing exactly what she was capable of. "Very well," she said. "You may court me." Valor inclined his head. "Generous. Do not become smug. I have been king for 11 years. Smugness is included in the crown." She looked at his face again. "That explains why it suits you." Behind them, Lucivar said her name. Seraphine did not turn. Her heart hurt, her eyes burned. She would probably cry later in a private room, then find something heavy to lift until breathing became easy again. But she walked back into the hall with the Alpha King at her side, her mother's hand warm against her back, and every person who had mocked her forced to move out of her path. The king's cloak trailed behind her like a piece of night that had decided to become a banner. The first object Seraphine broke after her rejection was not a chair, a door, or Lucivar's perfect nose. It was the court's certainty that she would leave quietly. The second object was a banquet table. That happened 3 hours later. Valor ordered the court luncheon to proceed, partly because 12 Alpha families had traveled for the ceremony, and partly because, as he informed Seraphine, "If I cancel the meal, they will think your temper frightened me." Did it? No, it interested me. That is not necessarily healthier. Kings are rarely selected for health. Seraphine sat at his right beneath the black throne. Her mother sat on her other side, calmly eating roast roots while every noble in the room pretended not to stare. Lucivar occupied a place 3 tables away. Caldrissa sat beside him but kept a careful distance. Neither spoke much. The small velvet box remained in Seraphine's pocket. Its weight increased with every glance she felt from the room. Mevrian noticed the pull of the fabric. "Your sphere is responding to distress." "I am not distressed." "The bench is bending beneath your pocket." Seraphine looked down. The carved wood had begun to bow. Valor leaned closer. "Is that the gift you brought for my brother?" It was. "May I see it?" She hesitated. "It is not impressive. Neither is half this court, yet they presented themselves freely." Seraphine drew out the box and placed it on the table. The wood gave a low creak. She opened the lid. The sphere glowed with pale moonlight. It was smooth, almost translucent, with threads of darker silver turning slowly inside. Beautiful, Seraphine thought, if one ignored that it weighed more than a suit of armor and had cracked the base of the box. Valor did not laugh. He removed one gauntlet and held his hand near it without touching. "It is pulling ambient magic toward itself." Mevrian nodded. "That is what I have tried to explain to the Coven Council. Seraphine does not fail to release magic. She condenses too much of it before release." At the neighboring table, a council witch whispered, "A convenient theory." Seraphine heard. She always heard. She reached for the sphere, intending to return it to the box. It jumped. Valor moved at the same instant. The sphere rolled across the table. Plates, goblets, and a silver gravy vessel slid after it as though the sphere had become a tiny moon with its own gravity. Seraphine lunged. Valor caught her around the waist before she pitched over the table, while his bare hand closed around the sphere. The table split down the middle. Everything on it slid into the laps of 6 dignitaries. For one suspended moment, no one spoke. The Alpha of the Eastern Marshes stared at a roasted onion resting in his ceremonial hood. Mevrian set down her fork. 4 tables this year. Seraphine was still held against Valor's armored chest. His arm was firm around her middle, supporting her without effort. She could feel the rise of his breath through layers of clothing and metal. He looked down at the sphere in his palm. "Heavy," he observed. Seraphine looked up at his face. "You are also heavy. I did not announce it to the room." You have not lifted me yet. Give me time. His eyes sharpened with amusement. Only then did Seraphine realize the hall had gone silent for a second reason. The king's arm remained around her waist. She cleared her throat. You can release me. You are standing on a broken table support. I can balance. I know. He did not release her until a servant moved the splintered wood. The delay was practical. The slight pressure of his hand before he let go was not. Lucivar had risen from his seat. Seraphine, are you hurt? The question came too late and too familiarly. She turned toward him. No. His gaze moved to Valor's bare hand around the sphere. That object could be dangerous. So could the woman who made it, Valor said. You were comfortable with both when they served you. Lucivar flinched. Caldrissa stared at her plate. Valor placed the sphere on the stone floor rather than another table. It settled without damage, humming faintly. The Crown's wardmasters will study this with Lady Seraphine's permission, he said. Not to determine whether her power exists. That has become obvious. We will determine how it works. The council witch who had whispered before lifted her chin. Your Majesty, a heavy light is not necessarily useful magic. Seraphine's mother inhaled. Seraphine touched her sleeve. I can manage this one. She faced the woman. You are correct. Weight alone is not useful. The witch looked pleased. Seraphine continued. That is why I have never thrown you. The Eastern Alpha choked on his drink. The roasted onion fell from his hood. Valor picked up his goblet from the wreckage and raised it toward Seraphine, a model of restraint. She accepted the compliment with dignity. The luncheon resumed around the broken table. Servants brought a replacement bench reinforced with iron. Seraphine ate little, but the ache in her chest changed. It was still grief. It was also anger, embarrassment, and a strange, unwelcome relief. Lucivar had ended the future she thought she wanted. Valor had not offered a replacement future. He had offered public courtship, investigation of her magic, and a place at his side from which she could choose. That difference frightened her more than a command would have. After the meal, Mevrian took Seraphine to a quiet chamber overlooking the inner courtyard. The moment the door closed, Seraphine leaned against it and covered her face. Her mother did not tell her not to cry. She simply sat on the window bench and waited. I believed him, Seraphine said at last. I know. I thought he was afraid to make the announcement because of the council. I did not think the announcement would be Caldrissa. I know. I carried him through a blizzard. You remind him of that every winter. Because it was difficult. He was surprisingly dense for someone so narrow. Mevrian's mouth softened. Grief does not become foolish merely because the man who caused it behaved foolishly. You loved him. Mourn honestly. Seraphine lowered her hands. The king is extremely handsome. Also true. Is it disloyal to be heartbroken and notice that? No. Eyes are not marriage vows. Seraphine sat beside her. Lucivar was my first love. Yes. What if I only like Valor because he embarrassed Lucivar? Then you will discover that before making promises, that is the purpose of courtship. A knock sounded. Valor entered only after Mavrian granted permission. He had removed his armor and wore a high-collared black tunic beneath a fitted ceremonial coat. Seraphine's grief paused again, this time with less dignity. The king noticed. I can return with uglier clothing, he said. Do you own any? No, the crown forbids it. Maëvrienne Rose, I suddenly remember an urgent matter elsewhere. Mother. You are both adults. The door will remain open and 3 guards are outside. Try not to damage the architecture. She left. Valor remained near the door. I did not come to demand gratitude. Good. I would have lifted you out. I considered that possibility. He held out the velvet box. The sphere rested inside, now cushioned by a folded square of royal chainmail. The wardmaster confirmed your mother's observation, he said. The sphere contains more compressed magic than 3 ordinary battle wards. It is unstable because every teacher has trained you to release power in lines. Your magic forms around a center. Seraphine took the box with both hands. You believe that after one examination? I believed Mevrian before the examination. This provided measurements for people who require numbers before courage. She looked down at the glow. Lucivar heard the same explanation years ago, she said. Vaylor's voice was controlled. My brother often believes whatever permits him to avoid a difficult choice. You dislike him. I love him. Those conditions can coexist. That answer reached her more deeply than praise would have. She closed the box. Why did you claim me? Because leaving you alone in that hall would have been unjust. That explains protection, not courtship. No. Then answer the second part. Vaylor studied her for several breaths. When I was 19, I visited the Southern Court without royal colors. I watched a girl throw 3 noble children into a fountain because they insulted a boy with a pretty face. Seraphine stared. You saw that? I also saw your mother defend your right to protect yourself while requiring you to repair the fountain. It was an expensive fountain. You rebuilt half of it alone. The masons were slow. You were 11. She shifted on the bench. You remembered me because I broke masonry? I remembered you because everyone else in that courtyard changed their behavior according to rank. You did not. I changed it according to faces. Lucivar was beautiful. I am aware. The chill in his voice was so slight she almost missed it. Seraphine looked at him with new interest. Are you jealous of your brother's face? No. That was very quick. Because the answer is simple. You are jealous. Vaylor stepped closer and lowered his voice. Lady Seraphine, you have looked at me more in 3 hours than you looked at him during the entire rejection. I am managing my envy. Heat rose into her cheeks. That is because you are new. A devastating explanation. Also larger. Better. She laughed before she could stop herself. The sound startled her. She had expected the whole day to remain broken. Vaylor did not look triumphant. He looked relieved. That expression made her wary in a different way. You truly remembered me, she said. Yes. For how long? Long enough that I knew your name before you lifted my brother. And you never approached me? You were pursuing him. I do not steal choices from women, even when I dislike their choices. Seraphine held his gaze. For the first time since Lucivar's announcement, she felt the shape of her own decision rather than the absence of his. Then court me, she said, slowly. Vaylor bowed his head. As slowly as you require. And do not use the crown to frighten away every man who speaks to me. I would never misuse royal authority. That answer was suspicious. I may give them administrative work. Vaylor. It was the first time she used his name. His eyes changed, the cold blue warming for one brief instant. Seraphine, he answered. The open door, the guards, and the whole stone castle remained exactly where they had been. Still, the room felt smaller. He offered his hand again, this time without an audience. She placed hers in it. The wardmaster expects us below, he said. He believes your sphere may be connected to the weakening moon wards along the northern roads. Us? Your magic, your decision, your investigation. I will provide access and protection. And your face? Unfortunately, it accompanies me everywhere. She rose. I will endure it. They walked from the chamber side by side. Seraphine was still heartbroken. She was also curious. Her mother had always told her that two truths could exist in the same body without destroying each other: strength and gentleness, anger and restraint, grief and appetite for life. Apparently, grief and an excellent view of the Alpha King's shoulders could coexist as well. The royal ward chamber lay beneath the oldest tower, where 12 black pillars carried silver lines into the bedrock. Seraphine had visited the upper court many times, usually to deliver messages for her mother or to retrieve Lucivar after a council meeting, but she had never been permitted below the third stair. Now Vaylor led her through 7 locked doors. The guards bowed to him and stared at her. She stared back until one young guard nearly walked into a wall. "You enjoy making them nervous," Vaylor observed. "Only when they begin it. He looked at you because you carried a prince outside. Then he should look with professional admiration. I will revise the guard handbook." At the lowest level, Ward Master Dovrin Quill waited beside a circular stone basin. He was a lean, silver-haired man with ink on every finger and the permanently troubled expression of someone responsible for structures no one appreciated until they failed. Beside him stood his niece Fenella, a young witch in a practical gray gown and square spectacles. Seraphine knew her slightly from the Coven Academy. Fenella specialized in map spells and had once hidden Seraphine in a laundry cart after an argument with 6 older students. "I heard about the chair," Fenella whispered as Seraphine approached. "It was a throne." "Even better." Dovrin cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, Lady Bramblevane." "Seraphine," she said. "Lady Seraphine, then, we have a problem." He touched the basin. A map of the kingdom appeared across its dark water. 12 pale lines spread from the capital toward the Pact territories. 3 northern lines flickered. "The Moon Wards have weakened for 6 months," Dovrin said. "At first we blamed winter damage. Then the failures began moving south in a pattern." "A pattern toward the capital," Vaylor said. "Yes. Every damaged ward contains a dense knot of corrupted magic. We have tried cutting the knots apart. They reform. We have tried burning them. They absorb the fire." Fenella placed a black stone on the table. It looked ordinary until Seraphine came close. Then the velvet box in her hands began to hum. The silver-blue sphere rose from its cushion. Dovrin took a quick step back. Vaylor moved between Seraphine and the others, not to block her from the sphere, but to shield the room if it flew. "Do not," she said. He looked over his shoulder. "Do not stand in front of me whenever my magic moves. I need to see it." He considered this and stepped to her side instead. "Better?" "Yes." The sphere floated above her palm. It had never done that for more than 3 breaths. 1, 2, 3. It remained. Seraphine forgot the room. She focused on the turning silver threads inside the sphere. Her teachers had always ordered her to push magic outward, shape it into a line, and release. Her mother had suggested something different only recently. Find the center and allow the magic to gather around it. Seraphine imagined a small moon. The sphere steadied. Fenella whispered, "It is beautiful." The black ward stone trembled. A thread of dark magic lifted from its surface and stretched toward the sphere. "Stop," Dovrin said sharply. "That corruption may enter her core." Seraphine did not stop. She felt no invasion. The sphere drew the thread inward, wrapped silver light around it, and compressed it into a dark speck at the center. The stone cleared. The sphere dropped. Vaylor caught her wrist with one hand and the magic sphere with the other. The impact drove his boots half an inch across the floor. Dovrin stared. "That object weighs at least 400 pounds. 360, Seraphine said automatically. "Perhaps more after breakfast." Valor set it carefully into the basin's empty stone ring. You can estimate its weight? I have broken enough scales. Fenella rushed forward. You absorbed the corruption. Do you feel ill, dizzy, angry, compelled to overthrow the kingdom? Seraphine considered. Hungry. She was hungry before, Valor said. Dovrin bent over the purified ward stone. This was not destroyed. The corruption was separated and contained. Mevrienne entered with 2 assistants carrying books. She took in the sphere, the cleaned stone, and Valor's hand still around Seraphine's wrist. Promising, she said. Valor released Seraphine at once. Her mother looked amused. I referred to the sphere. So did I, Valor said. Of course. Seraphine lifted the sphere back into its box. It was much lighter now. The dark speck remained at the center like a distant star. The ward knots may be the same kind of compressed magic, she said. If I can contain one, perhaps I can remove them from the roads. Dovrin shook his head. The nearest failure is at Frostbarrow Quarry. The knot there is larger than this room. Then I will make a larger sphere. You cannot control one plum-sized sphere for an hour. Seraphine met his worried eyes. That is why I train before we go. Valor folded his arms. We leave in 7 days. Dovrin looked appalled. Your Majesty, I was arguing against the journey. Then you should have argued better. 7 days is not enough. The northern ward may fail in 9. Mevrienne placed her books on the table. My daughter will be ready to examine the knot. She will not be ready to remove it alone. She will not be alone, Valor said. Seraphine watched him. Do kings normally accompany experimental witches into unstable quarries? Only the attractive ones. Fenella made a choking noise. Valor's expression remained perfectly composed. Seraphine pointed at him. That was deliberate. I am told courtship requires effort. Your effort is dangerous. So is yours. For the next 7 days, Seraphine trained beneath the old tower until her arms ached for reasons that had nothing to do with lifting stone. Mevrienne redesigned every exercise. Instead of pushing magic through narrow wand channels, Seraphine learned to gather it around weighted centers. Dovrin created iron rings of different sizes. Fenella drew maps of the sphere's movement and shouted warnings whenever furniture entered the likely path. Valor attended whenever council duties allowed. He never gave magical advice. He held shields, moved damaged equipment, and asked practical questions. When Seraphine failed, he did not soften his face with pity. When she succeeded, he did not behave as if he had granted the success. On the 2nd day, she formed 2 spheres. They immediately chased each other around the chamber and trapped Dovrin behind a pillar. On the 3rd day, she managed 3. One attached itself to Valor's belt and pulled him sideways into a curtain. Seraphine laughed so hard she lost control of the other 2, which rolled after him like loyal cannonballs. The king emerged from the curtain with his dignity mostly intact. Your magic likes me, he said. My magic attacks furniture and authority. It has excellent judgment. On the 4th day, the spheres circled her without striking anything. Valor stood inside the ring at her request, close enough to intervene but not in her path. His presence created a different kind of difficulty. Every time she looked up, she saw his dark hair, broad shoulders, and patient attention. One sphere drifted toward him. Seraphine, her mother warned. I know. The sphere hovered near Valor's chest. He did not move. It is responding to focus, Mevrienne said. Fenella adjusted her spectacles. Very intense focus. Seraphine's face heated. I am concentrating on not hitting him. Naturally, Fenella said. Valor lifted one hand beneath the sphere. It settled above his palm without touching him. What do you feel? He asked. Annoyed. About the magic. She closed her eyes. It wants an anchor, something stable enough that I do not need to hold every direction at once. Use me. Her eyes opened. The room became very quiet. Violor held her guise as the anchor. You could have begun with that. You would have missed Fenella's expression. Fenella turned away, shoulders shaking. Seraphine imagined the sphere orbiting Valor as a fixed point. It moved around him slowly, then faster, maintaining an exact distance from his body. A second sphere joined it, then a third. For the first time, the magic obeyed without strain. Valor stood in the center of 3 turning moons, watching her as though the rest of the chamber had vanished. Seraphine felt the pull between them through the magic, not ownership, balance. His steadiness allowed her power to move. You are very useful, she said. I will have that engraved on the throne. The one your brother is no longer using? Especially that one. On the 5th day, Lucivar came to watch. He stood at the chamber entrance while Seraphine guided 4 spheres through iron rings. Caldrissa was with him. She wore a plain blue training gown rather than court red, and she kept her hands folded tightly. Seraphine's concentration broke. The 4th sphere struck a practice shield. The shield spun across the room and pinned Dovrin's coat to the wall. He sighed. This is why I own duplicates. Lucivar stepped forward. Seraphine, may we speak? Her chest tightened with the old reflex to listen whenever his voice turned gentle. Valor said nothing. He stood beside the shield rack, arms folded, his expression unreadable. Seraphine lowered the spheres into their rings. You may speak here. Lucivar glanced at the others. Privately. No. The answer surprised them both. Lucivar looked wounded. Once, that expression would have made Seraphine rush to soften her words. She did not. I wanted to apologize, he said. The ceremony became cruel. I did not intend the court to mock you. You invited them before rejecting me. The Southern Council insisted on witnesses. The Council has insisted on many things. You used to ask whether they were right. His gaze fell to the spheres. I did not understand your magic was this close to awakening. The words landed with terrible clarity. Seraphine had imagined 100 reasons for his choice. Fear, pressure, ambition, confusion. She had not allowed herself to imagine the simplest one. He would have chosen her if her power had appeared sooner. He had not rejected her because he stopped caring. He had rejected the version of her who had not yet become useful enough. Thank you, she said. Lucivar blinked. For what? For making that clear. Seraphine, I meant that I was wrong. You were wrong when I was still failing. You are only uncomfortable now that other people can see it. Caldrissa looked at Lucivar sharply. He took another step. I never said your years beside me meant nothing. You said there had been a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect your dignity. Seraphine almost laughed. By denying our entire relationship before 12 packs? Valor pushed away from the shield rack. Lucivar turned on him. Do not interfere. She has answered you twice, Valor said. I am not interfering. I am counting. You claimed her to punish me. The room chilled. Valor's voice became very soft. My interest in Seraphine began before you learned to tie your own boots. Do not flatter yourself into becoming the center of her next choice. Lucivar stared. Seraphine stared too. Valor looked at her. Was that too much information? Possibly. Continue later. Gladly. Caldrissa stepped between the brothers. Lucivar, we should leave. He looked at her as though he had forgotten she was there. Something in Caldrissa's face hardened. Seraphine knew that feeling. It was the pain of standing beside a man whose attention had already turned elsewhere. Wait, Seraphine said. Caldrissa paused. Seraphine walked to her. Did you know what he planned to say? Caldrissa swallowed. I knew he would announce me. I did not know he would deny everything between you. Would it have changed your answer? I do not know. Shame crossed her features. My family has debts. The Southern Council promised to restore our lands if I accepted. I told myself you and Lucivar had never made a public vow. I told myself you were strong enough to survive embarrassment. I am, Seraphine said. That does not make the embarrassment harmless. I know. Lucivar said, Caldrissa, this is not necessary. She turned on him. You spoke for both of us in the hall. I will speak for myself now. For the first time, Seraphine saw more than the glamorous witch beside the man who had hurt her. She saw a woman pressed by debt, pride, and a family that valued her magic more than her comfort. It did not erase Caldrissa's choice. It made the choice human. I am sorry, Caldrissa said, not because the king claimed you, because we allowed them to laugh. Seraphine nodded once. That apology belongs to me. I accept hearing it. I have not decided whether I forgive it. Fair. Lucivar looked between them, baffled by a conversation that did not revolve around him. Vaylor noticed. A difficult morning for princes. Seraphine covered a smile. Lucivar left without another word. Caldrissa followed more slowly, pausing at the door to look back at Seraphine's spheres. They are beautiful, she said. Then she was gone. Seraphine stood very still. Vaylor approached, but stopped beyond reach. Do you want comfort, solitude, or something heavy to throw? She thought about it. All three, in that order. He opened his arms. The invitation was so unexpected that she nearly laughed. Then the ache in her chest rose again, and she stepped into him. His arms closed around her with careful strength. Her cheek rested against the high collar of his coat. He did not tell her Lucivar was unworthy or that she should be grateful for a better man. He simply held her while she breathed through the humiliation of learning that her first love had measured her by the timing of her power. When she drew back, Vaylor released her immediately. Solitude next? He asked. Not yet. Heavy object? She pointed to the iron practice pillar. Together they carried it to the outer yard. Vaylor could have moved it alone. Seraphine knew that. He let her take most of the weight without pretending otherwise. She threw it into a sand pit. The impact sent a brown cloud over 3 startled ministers. Vaylor watched them run. Effective, he said. I feel better. Excellent. Solitude may be postponed until after lunch. By the 7th day, Seraphine could hold 5 spheres in a stable orbit for 10 minutes. The expedition left for Frostbarrow Quarry at dawn. Vaylor rode at the front with 20 royal guards. Seraphine traveled beside her mother in a reinforced carriage containing Dovrin's instruments, Fenella's maps, and 6 iron cradles for magic spheres. Lucivar and Caldrissa remained in the capital by royal order, though Lucivar had argued that the Southern Alpha should join any investigation of the wards. Vaylor had replied, You have a ceremonial chair to retrieve. The journey north took 2 days. Frostbarrow lay between steep gray hills where workers cut moonstone used in pack boundaries and healing halls. The quarry should have glowed after sunset. Instead, black veins spread through the exposed stone. The local forewoman, Isabet Cromere, met them at the gate. She was a broad, gray-haired woman with a missing front tooth and no patience for titles. King, she said to Vaylor. Witch. Other witch. Scholar. Spectacled scholar. Fenella looked delighted. I like her. Isabet pointed toward the quarry. The lower shelf cracked this morning. I pulled the workers out, but 4 ward anchors are still below. If they break, the whole northern line goes dark. A deep vibration rolled beneath their boots. Seraphine's spheres stirred inside their iron cradles. How long? Vaylor asked. Isabet shrugged. Could be an hour. Could be before I finish this sentence. the hillside groaned. A section of the upper path collapsed behind them, blocking the gate. Isabet looked at the new wall of stone. Before the sentence, then. No one laughed for long. The quarry floor split. Workers shouted from the far side. They had not all evacuated. 6 men and 2 women were trapped behind a fallen loading frame. Black light pulsed through the cracks beneath them. Valor issued orders with calm speed. Guards moved civilians uphill. Dovrin and Fenella began drawing a temporary ward. Mavrienne raised both hands and spread a silver barrier over the nearest ledge. Seraphine saw the loading frame tilt. "They will be crushed," she said. Valor followed her gaze. "The path is unstable." "So am I. We can discuss our flaws later." She ran. The first gap was 6 feet wide. Seraphine jumped it, landed on sliding stone, and used her ironwood staff to steady herself. Valor came behind her with 2 guards. "I did not ask you to follow," she shouted. "You did not need to." The loading frame dropped another inch. The trapped workers pressed against the rock wall. Seraphine wedged her staff beneath the beam and lifted. The frame weighed several tons. Her arms shook. Valor reached the beam and put his shoulder under it beside her. Together they raised it high enough for one worker to crawl free. "Move," Seraphine ordered. The workers scrambled beneath their arms. A crack opened directly under Valor's boot. Black magic surged upward. Seraphine's velvet box tore open at her belt. The silver-blue sphere shot into the crack and expanded. For one heartbeat, it was the size of an apple. Then a shield. Then a great glowing globe filling the gap beneath them. The corrupted light bent toward it. Seraphine felt the sphere pull at her mind. It wanted everything: the darkness in the stone, the strength in her arms, the fear in the workers, even the moonlight hidden behind the clouds. "Center," Mavrienne called from the ledge. "Find the center, Seraphine. Do not fight the shape." Seraphine trusted her mother. She stopped trying to flatten the magic into a shield. She imagined a moon beneath the earth. The sphere became round and steady. Darkness streamed into it. The loading frame grew lighter as the corrupted ward released its hold on the metal. "Now," Valor said. They lifted together. The last worker escaped. The stone shelf beneath Seraphine broke away. Valor caught her around the waist. She caught the beam with one hand and his armor collar with the other. For a ridiculous moment, the Alpha King hung over the glowing gap, supported partly by a witch who had once been told she could not lift a proper spell. "I have you," he said. "I have you too. This is not how I imagined our second embrace. Your expectations are very demanding." One of the guards seized Valor's arm. Together they climbed onto stable ground. The great sphere rose from the crack, now streaked with black. It floated above the quarry, pulling corruption from every vein of stone. Seraphine stood beneath it with both hands raised. The weight pressed through her body, her knees bent. Valor moved behind her and braced his hands at her waist, becoming the anchor they had practiced. "Use me," he said near her ear. She felt his steadiness through the contact. The sphere stopped wavering. Mavrienne and Dovrin redirected the purified ward energy into the 4 anchors. Fenella shouted distances and angles. Isabet ordered workers to strike supporting wedges in rhythm with the pulses. This was not Seraphine saving everyone alone. It was her power at the center of many people's work. The last black vein left the quarry wall. The sphere contracted slowly until it was the size of a large shield. Seraphine guided it into an iron cradle. The cradle sank 6 inches into the ground. Silence followed. Then every moonstone face in Frostbarrow lit silver. Workers cheered. Seraphine turned inside Valor's arms. He had soot on his cheek and a cut across the edge of one gauntlet. His expression held fierce pride. She forgot the workers for one improper second and looked at his mouth. His gaze lowered to hers. The air changed. Then Isabet struck Valor on the back hard enough to make a lesser man stumble. "Good lifting, King," she said. "The witch did most of it." Seraphine laughed against his armor. Valor closed his eyes briefly. "I am aware." Isabet turned to Seraphine. "You are Mevrien's girl?" "Yes." "Your mother closed the Western Fisher when I was young. Everyone said no witch would match her." Seraphine waited for the comparison. Isabet grinned through the gap in her teeth. "Good thing you did something different." The words settled warmly where old insults had lived. That night, the quarry workers held a feast in the reinforced storage hall. There were no delicate court dishes, only thick stew, black bread, baked apples, and enough benches to survive Seraphine's pockets. She sat between Fenella and Isabet while the workers retold the rescue with increasing exaggeration. By the fourth version, Seraphine had lifted the entire mountain. By the sixth, Valor had dangled helplessly from her belt. "I did not dangle," he said from across the table. Isabet drank her ale. "You were very elegant about it." Fenella leaned toward Seraphine. "The king is glaring at Captain Audran." Seraphine glanced down the table. Captain Audran Fenwick, commander of the Frostbarrow Watch, was a handsome, dark-skinned wolf with a warm smile and one silver braid at his temple. He had spent the last 10 minutes asking Seraphine whether she would consider teaching quarry guards how to fight with weighted staffs. Valor was not glaring. He was watching with the expression he used for unstable wardstones. Audran noticed and raised his cup to the king. Valor raised his in return. "He seems polite," Seraphine whispered. "He reassigned 3 ministers for looking at you," Fenella whispered back. "To where?" "Bridge inventory." Seraphine looked at Valor. "Administrative work." His eyes met hers. He had heard. "The bridges require counting," he said. Audran laughed. "Your Majesty, I already completed this district's inventory." "Do it again." "Because I spoke to Lady Seraphine." "Because accuracy is the foundation of government." Seraphine folded her arms. "Valor." "Seraphine." "Captain Audran may continue speaking to me." The king's face remained calm. "I have not forbidden speech. You are trying to bury him under bridge records. A captain should understand local infrastructure." Audran leaned back, openly amused. "I can admire her and count bridges. Wolves are capable of 2 thoughts." Valor's gaze cooled. "Some barely manage one." Isabet slapped the table. "Excellent. The king is jealous. We have not had entertainment this good since the flour mill exploded." "I am not jealous," Valor said. Every person at the table laughed. Seraphine looked at him, pleased despite herself. "That was very quick." "Because the answer is simple. You used that sentence before." "It remains correct." Audran lifted both hands. "For the safety of the bridges, I withdraw from competition." "There was no competition," Valor said. "Naturally." Later, when the feast ended, Seraphine stepped outside for air. Snow had begun to fall. The repaired moon ward spread pale light across the quarry walls. She stood beneath the eaves and let the cold settle her thoughts. Lucivar would have hated this place. He disliked soot, rough benches, and meals without polished silver. She had spent years adjusting herself around those dislikes, not because he demanded it directly, but because she wanted his comfort. Valor came to stand beside her. "Audran is safely counting bridges," he said. "You are impossible." He volunteered. "After you threatened him with civic responsibility." A terrible fate. She smiled, then looked back at the glowing quarry. "I did it." "You did." Mother was right. She usually is. Do not tell her that. I value my life. Seraphine's smile faded. Part of me wishes Lucivar had seen it. Vaylor was silent for a moment. That does not offend me. It should. You are supposedly jealous. I am jealous of his history with you. I am not jealous of your honesty. She turned toward him. Snow caught in his dark hair. Without the court around him, he looked less like a symbol and more like a man who had spent the day beneath a collapsing mountain because she ran first. Why did you come across the gap? She asked. Because you did. That is not a sensible royal policy. Neither is allowing the woman I intend to court to hold several tons alone. You could have ordered guards. They were behind me. You could have stayed safe. His expression sharpened. Do not ask me to watch you risk yourself from a safe distance. I will respect your strength. I will not use it as an excuse for cowardice. The words moved through her like warm light. Lucivar had accepted her protection because he needed it. Later, when he no longer needed it, he had become embarrassed by the woman who had given it. Vaylor did not need her to stand in front of him. He chose to stand beside her. Seraphine reached up and brushed snow from his eyebrow scar. His entire body went still. The touch was small. The tension it created was not. You are staring again, he said. I nearly lost you into a magical pit. I am confirming the face survived. Your concern is touching. The face is valuable. And the man? She let her fingers rest against his cheek for one heartbeat longer. Under consideration. Vaylor's bare hand closed gently around her wrist. He turned his face into her palm, not enough to become intimate before she chose it, but enough that she felt the warmth of his breath. Take all the time you need, he said. She believed him. That made it difficult to step away. So she did not step far. They stood beneath the eaves while snow covered the quarry road, close enough that their shoulders touched, neither pretending the contact was accidental. News of Frostbarrow reached the capital before the expedition did. By the time Seraphine rode through the western gate, children were rolling painted wooden balls along the street and shouting that they were defeating curses. Merchants had already begun selling silver blue sweets called witch moons. One baker displayed a loaf shaped like a ceremonial chair with 2 little sugar boots sticking from it. Seraphine stopped the carriage. I need that bread. Vaylor, riding beside her, looked toward the bakery. For symbolic closure? For lunch, closure requires butter. The baker refused payment and nearly fainted when Seraphine lifted the entire display counter so his apprentice could retrieve a dropped coin. Vaylor bought every chair-shaped loaf and ordered them delivered to the palace dining hall. That is excessive, Seraphine said. I am a king. Moderation would confuse the public. The public was not confused. They cheered as Seraphine passed. The court was less enthusiastic. 3 days after their return, the Council of 12 demanded a formal hearing on Vaylor's declaration of courtship. The crown's right of open choice was ancient and legal, but several alpha families argued that a king could not announce a potential queen without testing her fitness. Seraphine read the petition twice. They want me to complete the Luna trials, she said. Fenella sat cross-legged on the library floor among stacks of law books. Not the ordinary trials, these are the old ones. How old? Old enough that one section involves carrying a stone wolf through an obstacle course while elders throw wet grain. Seraphine looked interested. How heavy is the wolf? That is not the concerning part. Mevrian turned a page. The trials were abandoned because they became public entertainment rather than a measure of judgment. The petitioners know she can lift things, Vaylor said from the window. They will choose tasks designed to make strength appear crude and magic appear insufficient. Seraphine leaned over the table. Can you refuse? Yes. Would that make them believe I need the crown to hide my weakness? Yes. Then accept. Vaylor's jaw tightened. I will not permit them to humiliate you again. You cannot prevent every cruel person from speaking. I can remove their speaking privileges. That is called tyranny. The definition is disputed. She walked to him. At the ceremony, you gave me a choice. Give me this one too. His gaze searched her face. You do not owe them proof. No, but I would enjoy watching them regret asking. Mevrienne closed the book. That is my daughter. The Luna trials were scheduled for the Winter Solstice Festival, when representatives from every pack would already be in the capital. Seraphine had 12 days to prepare. The petition named 3 tests: strength under restraint, magical protection, and judgment before the packs. The first was held in the Royal Training Arena. A stone wolf weighing nearly 2,000 pounds stood at one end of a course filled with narrow bridges, swinging barriers, and trenches of wet grain. The candidate had to carry the statue to the opposite platform without damaging the course or dropping the wolf. The stands were full. Lucivar sat with the southern delegation. Caldrissa sat 2 places away from him, her posture formal. Vaylor occupied the central royal box with Mevrienne and the council. Fenella stood near the course, holding a clipboard and looking far too cheerful. Seraphine wore a high-collared dark blue training gown over fitted wool trousers and tall boots. The gown was split only at the lower sides for movement, with heavy panels covering her legs. Leather guards protected her forearms. Her ironwood staff remained outside the course. Councillor Varric Ashmorn, who had submitted the petition, addressed the crowd. He was an elderly alpha with a narrow face and a voice polished by decades of pretending insults were procedure. The first test measures power governed by care, he said. A Luna must bear great burdens without harming those around her. Seraphine looked at the hanging sacks of grain. And the food? A traditional distraction. It seems wasteful. The grain is old. Then it belongs in compost, not in my hair. A few spectators laughed. Varric did not. Begin. Seraphine approached the statue. Its carved body was wider than her shoulders. Iron rings had been set beneath its chest. She crouched, put both hands through the rings, and lifted. The crowd gasped as the stone wolf rose against her body. Seraphine adjusted the weight and stepped onto the first bridge. A sack burst overhead. Wet grain struck her hair and shoulders. She kept walking. The second sack missed her and hit Councillor Varric's assistant. Fenella checked the rope mechanism. Strange, the wind appears judgmental. The crowd laughed again. At the first swinging barrier, Seraphine could not pass while carrying the statue across her front. She shifted it onto one shoulder. The stone muzzle rose above her head like an enormous, disapproving hat. Vaylor leaned forward in the royal box. Seraphine caught his eye. Do not worry. I am admiring the hat, he called. She smiled and moved through the barrier. At the grain trench, the true trap appeared. The mud beneath the wet kernels was deeper than the course plans showed. Seraphine stepped in and sank to her knees. The crowd murmured. She tried to pull free without dropping the statue. The mud held. Varric's mouth tightened with satisfaction. Seraphine looked toward Fenella. Her friend was staring at the measurement stake beside the trench. The depth is wrong, Fenella said. Continue the test, Varric ordered. Vaylor rose. Seraphine shook her head once. He stopped, though every line of his body resisted it. She lowered the stone wolf carefully until it rested across the trench, its legs on either bank. Then she crawled beneath its belly, using the statue as a bridge while dragging herself from the mud. The old rules said she must not drop the wolf. They did not say the wolf could not carry her. She reached the far bank, stood, and pulled the statue after her. The arena erupted. At the final wall, 3 council-selected champions waited to block her. The test allowed them to push, pull, or obstruct the candidate without weapons. All three were adult male wolves in padded armor. Seraphine stared at Varric. "You chose only 3?" One champion growled. That was not an insult, she told him. It was concern for the schedule. They attacked together. Seraphine shifted the statue forward like a battering ram. The champions scattered. One climbed onto the stone wolf's back and wrapped both arms around its neck, apparently hoping his weight would slow her. She kept walking. The second seized her sleeve. She turned in a controlled circle, forcing him to run around her until he lost his footing and landed in the grain trench. The third planted himself on the final platform. "You will not pass," he said. Seraphine set the statue down before him. "Then you should move." He braced both hands against the wolf. She pushed. His boots slid across the platform. He strained, face reddening, while Seraphine advanced one slow step at a time. At the edge, she stopped. She could have pushed him off. Instead, she lifted the statue over his head and placed it on the marked pedestal behind him. The champion looked up between the stone legs. "You may move now," she said. He moved quickly. The arena roared with laughter and applause. Valor descended before the judges announced the result. He met Seraphine at the edge of the course and removed a wet piece of grain from her hair. "You wore the wolf well," he said. "It was heavy." "I was referring to the expression. I learned it from your counsel." Varric approached, displeasure hidden beneath ceremony. The candidate completed the strength trial. "And discovered an altered trench," Valor said. "The old plans may have been inaccurate." Fenella held up her clipboard. "The original depth is marked here. Someone removed the stone base last night." Varric looked at her. "Are you accusing the council?" "I am accusing someone with a shovel. The council's relationship to shovels remains under investigation." Valor's face became dangerously still. "Find who changed it." Seraphine touched his arm. "After the trials. Before someone attempts something worse." "Both," she said. "You investigate. I continue." He looked at her mud-covered gown and the grain tangled in her hair. "You should rest." "I carried one statue." "And 3 champions. Only one stayed on long enough to count." His hand settled briefly at the back of her neck, warm and hidden beneath her hair. "Very well, but if the next test is altered, I end it." "Agreed." The second trial took place at dusk in Mooncourt Square. 100 volunteers stood inside a ring of 12 ward stones. Seraphine had to protect them from controlled magical attacks cast by council witches. The attacks would be non-lethal: wind, cold, darkness, and illusion. Traditional candidates created a broad dome. Seraphine had never created a dome. She carried 6 iron cradles into the square. The crowd whispered. Lucivar watched from the front row. His expression had changed since Frostbarrow. Pride and regret sat uneasily together, as if he had not yet decided which one he deserved. Caldrissa approached Seraphine before the test. "Varric selected the attacking witches," she said quietly. "2 of them trained under my aunt. They favor narrow strikes aimed at the caster's concentration." "Why tell me?" "Because this is a test, not an execution." Seraphine studied her. "Thank you." Caldrissa nodded and returned to her seat. Valor stood outside the ring with Mevrian. He wore full black armor. He had argued that the controlled attacks should be tested on council members first. The council declined. Seraphine placed one hand over the first cradle. "Begin," Varric ordered. Cold wind struck the ring. Seraphine raised 3 silver-blue spheres. They spun outward and formed a triangle. The wind bent around them, but gaps remained. Volunteers cried out as ice swept across the square. She added a 4th sphere. The pattern wavered. A spear of darkness came directly toward her face. Seraphine ducked. The spear struck the central ward stone and split into shadow birds. They filled the ring, screaming. The volunteers panicked. Seraphine's spheres began to fall. "Center," Mevrian called. Seraphine knew the lesson. Find a fixed point, build the orbit. She looked for Valor. He stood beyond the ring, unable to enter without invalidating the test. Their eyes met. He placed one hand over the royal crest on his chest. "Use me." Seraphine fixed her attention on him. The spheres steadied. But the volunteers were not around Valor, they were around her. She understood. The anchor did not need to be a person, it needed to be a decision. Protect them. She became the center. 6 spheres rose around her. They did not form a dome, they moved. One intercepted the cold and turned white with frost. One absorbed darkness, deepening to purple. 2 spun around the volunteers, knocking illusion birds apart without touching anyone. The last 2 hovered above the ward stones and drew loose magic into themselves. The attacks intensified. Seraphine widened the orbit. The spheres moved faster, creating a living wall that adjusted to each strike. Where a dome would have cracked, the orbit shifted. Where darkness gathered, a purple sphere swallowed it. Where wind entered, a silver sphere compressed it into harmless spirals that lifted hats and nothing else. One elderly volunteer's hat landed on Veyric. The square laughed. Veyric threw it aside. Increase the attack. Caldrissa rose. The agreed limit has been reached. Sit down. No. Lucivar looked at her in surprise. Caldrissa stepped into the open. The test measures protection. She has protected them. Continuing would measure how much harm the Council is willing to risk to avoid admitting it. Veyric's expression hardened. Your family lands depend on Council review. The threat was clear. Caldrissa went pale but did not sit. Seraphine saw it while holding the orbit. For one dangerous instant, anger pulled every sphere toward Veyric. She controlled them. Strength was not wrong, careless harm was. Her mother's lesson had never applied only to fists. End the trial, Seraphine said. Veyric ignored her. Continue. Valor entered the ring. The attacking witches stopped at once. The trial is ended, he said. Veyric stood. Then she fails. Every sphere in the square turned toward him. Seraphine had not commanded them to attack. They simply hovered in a perfect line, heavy enough to crush stone and controlled enough to leave the old man untouched. She walked between them. No, she said, I completed the task. The volunteers are safe. Caldrissa prevented you from changing the task into cruelty. Veyric glanced at the spheres. Is that a threat? It is a demonstration of restraint. You seem to require visual lessons. The volunteers began applauding. The applause spread into the crowd. One by one, the council witches lowered their hands. Duvrin announced the result before Veyric could speak. Protection trial completed. No injuries. All attacks contained. Fenella added, 1 hat displaced. It has been recovered. Valor looked at Caldrissa. Your family's debts will be reviewed by the Crown, not used by the Council as a leash. Caldrissa's chin trembled. She bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thanks, Seraphine. She insisted your apology be judged separately from your usefulness. I am attempting to learn from her. Seraphine blinked. He had listened to a conversation he had not been part of and drawn the right lesson without claiming credit. Her heart, which had spent years serving a prettier but smaller dream, moved toward him with alarming ease. The third trial was judgment. At midnight, Seraphine stood before the 12-pack representatives in the Great Hall. No obstacle course waited. No spell attacked her. Instead, Veyric presented a dispute. 2 northern villages shared a moonstone bridge. One village had repaired it after storms. The other had refused to pay, claiming poverty. The council proposed closing the bridge to the poorer village until the debt was paid. Seraphine listened to both village leaders. The first spoke of labor and fairness. The second admitted his village could not pay because the failing wards had ruined their winter crops. Varric asked, "What is your judgment?" Seraphine looked at the map. "Who owns the quarry that supplies repair stone?" "The crown," Dovrin said. "Who collected road taxes while the wards were failing?" Varric's mouth tightened. "The regional council." "Then the regional council will return the taxes collected for protection it did not provide. The poorer village will contribute labor rather than coin. The wealthier village will be reimbursed for half its materials from the restored taxes. The bridge stays open." The first leader frowned. "Why should we accept labor from people who refused before?" Seraphine faced him. "Because they did not refuse. They lacked coin after a magical failure the council concealed. You deserve repayment. They deserve access to the healer across the river. Fairness is not achieved by making the weaker village suffer until your anger feels balanced." The second leader bowed his head. Varric said, "You would burden the council for a natural ward failure?" "We do not yet know it was natural. We do know the council collected payment while protection weakened. Power receives responsibility with its privileges." Vaylor watched her from the black throne. Lucivar watched from below it. One looked proud. The other looked as if he had discovered the future he discarded had become visible only after it no longer belonged to him. The pack representatives voted. 10 supported Seraphine's judgment, 1 abstained. Varric voted against. The Luna trials were complete. The hall erupted. Mavrian reached Seraphine first and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "You did not throw Varric." "I considered it." "Excellent judgment." Fenella joined them. His expression was better than throwing him. Caldrissa approached more carefully. "You defended my family after I stood beside Lucivar." "I defended you from blackmail," Seraphine said. "Do not make me regret the distinction." Caldrissa's eyes filled. "I will not." Lucivar waited until the women moved aside. "You were magnificent," he said. The words once would have meant everything. Now they arrived after the proof. "Thank you," Seraphine said. He looked at the royal cloak around her shoulders. Vaylor had not placed it there tonight. She had chosen to wear it. "I would have supported you," Lucivar said, "if I had understood." "My mother explained. I explained. You did understand. You did not believe. There is a difference. Not to the person standing alone." He lowered his voice. "Do you love him?" Seraphine looked toward Vaylor. The king was speaking with village leaders. He had removed the crown and held it beneath one arm so an elderly woman could address him without craning her neck. He listened without interruption. His face was still excellent. His character had become inconveniently better. "I am learning him," she said. Lucivar flinched. "You knew me all your life." "I knew the boy I protected. I did not know the man who would deny me. I made one mistake." "No, you made one decision in public after many decisions in private. The public one only allowed me to see them." Valar looked up. He did not approach. He gave Seraphine room to finish. Lucivar followed her gaze. "He has always taken what he wants." He asked, "A king's request is still pressure. Then why did I feel more choice beside his throne than beside your promise?" Lucivar had no answer. Seraphine touched his sleeve, a final gesture of tenderness for the boy he had been. "I do not regret protecting you, but protection was not a debt you could repay by marrying me, and my love was not permission to hide me when I became inconvenient." She walked away. Vaylor waited near the Moonstone Arch. "Do you require comfort, solitude, or a heavy object?" he asked. "A dance." He glanced toward the musicians. That was not among the options. Kings should adapt. The solstice music had begun, slow drums beneath strings. couples moved onto the floor. Seraphine extended her hand. Valor stared at it as though she had offered him a kingdom he did not trust himself to touch. "You are certain?" "No. Courtship would be dull if I were certain of everything." He took her hand. Valor danced with the same controlled strength he brought to battle. He guided without dragging, adjusted when she chose a different step, and never acted surprised by the weight of her hand or the firmness of her balance. Seraphine had danced with Lucivar many times. She had always made herself lighter, quieter, less likely to lead. With Valor, she tested the movement. She turned them sharply. He followed. She reversed direction. He smiled. "Trying to overthrow me?" he asked. "Assessing stability." "Your findings?" "Promising." The dance carried them beneath the central moon window. Silver light crossed his face. Seraphine's attention wandered. "Again?" he murmured. "The lighting is unfair." "To whom?" "My judgment." His hand at her back drew her 1 inch closer. Every layer of clothing remained proper, every movement public, yet the small change sent warmth through her. "Your judgment survived 3 trials," he said. "It may survive my face." "Your confidence is unattractive." "A tragedy. Fortunately, the rest compensates." He laughed softly. At the edge of the floor, Odrin Fenwick lifted a cup in greeting. Valor turned Seraphine so his own broad back blocked the captain from view. She looked up at him. "Was that choreography?" "A traditional royal step." "It resembles jealousy." "You are mistaken." Very quick again. "The music requires decisive answers." Seraphine laughed, and this time the sound did not surprise her. When the dance ended, Valor did not release her hand. "The trials are complete," he said. "The council can no longer challenge my right to court you." "They challenged my fitness, not your right." "I know. I disliked both." "What happens now?" "Now you decide whether the courtship continues." She searched his face. "You would stop if I asked?" "Immediately." "Even after all this?" "Especially after all this. Public support is not a chain." The hall, the music, and the watching court seemed to recede. Seraphine had once mistaken years of history for certainty. Valor offered certainty only in one matter: she could leave. That freedom made her want to stay. "The courtship continues," she said. His thumb moved over her knuckles. "Good. You sound relieved." "Kings are permitted 1 emotion per festival." "Which did you choose?" "You." The answer stole every clever reply. Valor lifted her hand and pressed a restrained kiss to her knuckles. It was not one of the kisses that changed her life. It was the one that made her realize such kisses were approaching. After the festival, Seraphine expected the court to become easier. Instead, it became stranger. Nobles who had ignored her now brought gifts. Witches who had laughed at her training asked whether she would demonstrate sphere magic for their daughters. 3 unmarried alphas sent formal invitations to dinner despite Valor's public courtship. Valor responded by assigning each man a different royal infrastructure report. "You promised not to frighten them away," Seraphine said when she found the documents on his desk. "I did not frighten them. One has been ordered to inspect sewer gates in February. The city requires functioning sewer gates." "You are jealous." "I am governing." "With suspicious focus." He leaned back in his chair. The royal study was warm with firelight. Maps covered one wall. Reports covered every surface except the chair Seraphine occupied. "Would you prefer I accept their invitations on your behalf?" he asked. "No." "Then my approach has produced the desired outcome." "I could refuse them myself." "You may, after they complete the reports." She threw a cushion at him. He caught it one-handed. "Violence against the crown," he said. "Administrative correction. I will need a committee." She crossed the room to retrieve the cushion. Valor stood at the same time. They reached it together. His hand closed over hers. Neither moved. Seraphine was suddenly aware of the quiet room, the fire, and the way his coat stretched across his shoulders when he bent. Valor noticed her attention. "You have seen my shoulders before. They remain consistent. I appreciate reliability. A rare quality in men with pretty faces?" The reference to Lucivar was light, but she heard the question beneath it. "Lucivar's face was never the problem," she said. "I liked it honestly. I liked protecting him. I liked being needed." Valor's fingers tightened slightly around hers. "And now?" "Now I am learning that being needed can hide whether one is valued." He straightened, bringing her with him. They stood close, hands still joined around the cushion. "I do not need you to protect my face," he said. "It would be wasteful to let anything happen to it. I need your judgment in the Ward investigation. I value your strength. I want your company. None of those conditions obligates you to love me." Seraphine's breath caught. "You say dangerous things very calmly. I have practice. What do you want from me now?" His gaze moved to her mouth and returned to her eyes. "Permission." The word contained no pressure. Seraphine understood what he was asking. Her first instinct was to think of Lucivar. The memory came, but it did not command her. She remembered a forehead kiss beneath a bell tower, a pearl clasp, and years of hope. She honored the memory by refusing to pretend it had never existed. Then she looked at the man before her. "You may kiss me," she said. Valor released the cushion and touched her face with one hand. He moved slowly enough that she could change her mind at any point. She did not. Their first kiss was gentle, closed, and brief. It held no demand for more. It was warm, careful, and startling in its restraint. Valor stepped back first, though his hand remained against her cheek. Seraphine opened her eyes. "That was very controlled. You asked for slow." "I did. Do you object?" She considered. "Not to the principle." His eyes warmed. A promising judgment. She rose onto her toes and kissed him once more, equally brief but less cautious. When she stepped back, Valor looked as though the entire Northern War had been easier than remaining still. Seraphine picked up the cushion and returned it to the chair. "I have training," she said. "Now?" "Yes." "You kiss a king twice and leave for training?" "My mother says consistency is essential." "Your mother has become my enemy." From the open doorway, Mevrian said, "Only now?" Valor closed his eyes. Seraphine began laughing. Her mother entered carrying a sealed black stone. Duvrin found this inside the altered trench. It contains the same corruption as Frostbarrow. Someone placed it there deliberately. The warmth left the room. Valor took the stone without touching it directly. Can it be traced? Possibly, but there is more. The corruption carries a council seal. Seraphine looked toward the maps. The weakening wards, the altered trial, the pressure against Caldrissa's family, and Varric's insistence on increasing the magical attack no longer appeared separate. "He wanted my spears to absorb more corruption," she said. Mevrian nodded. "The question is why?" Valor's hand closed around the sealed case. "We will ask him." Seraphine shook her head. "Not yet. If Varric is working alone, arresting him ends it. If he is not, the others disappear. He endangered you. He endangered volunteers, workers, and the northern packs. That is larger than me." Valor's anger remained visible only in the stillness of his body. "What do you propose?" Seraphine looked at the black speck turning inside her silver sphere. We let him believe I absorbed exactly what he wanted. Then we watch who comes to collect it. The plan required Seraphine to behave as though she had become careless after victory. This was more difficult than expected because half the court already believed carrying a stone wolf through wet grain was a sign of poor judgment. Duvrin built a false containment sphere around a fragment of harmless shadow glass. Mevrian layered it with Seraphine's magical signature. Fenella altered the royal vault records to show that the corrupted sphere from Frostbarrow had been moved into the Moon Archive for private study. Vaylor assigned guards who understood they were supposed to be seen avoiding the North Corridor at midnight. "They are terrible actors," Seraphine whispered from behind a library screen. One guard walked past the corridor and announced loudly, "I certainly hope no criminal notices that the Moon Archive is unguarded." Vaylor stood behind her, close enough that his breath stirred a loose strand of hair. "I selected them for loyalty, not subtlety. Subtle men often become ministers." "You dislike ministers?" "I dislike most collections of men seated around a long table." She looked back at him. "That sounds difficult for a king." "It is why I attend meetings armed." They waited. The palace settled into winter silence. Outside, snow pressed white against the windows. Inside the Moon Archive, the decoy sphere glowed within a glass case. A thread of false corruption turned at its center. Near midnight, the North Corridor door opened. A figure in a council robe entered. Seraphine recognized Vayric's assistant, the same narrow young man who had operated the grain ropes during the strength trial. He carried a bronze key and a folded black cloth. He moved directly to the case. Vaylor signaled the guards. Before they could enter, the assistant placed the cloth over the sphere and spoke a phrase in the Old Ward language. The archive floor lit with black lines. "That is not part of our trap," Seraphine said. The lines raced beneath the screen. Vaylor seized her around the waist and threw them both aside as the floor opened. They fell into darkness. Seraphine struck stone, rolled, and landed against Vaylor's armored side. The impact drove the air from her lungs but caused no sharp pain. Above them, the opening sealed. A purple flame rose along the walls. They were in an old ritual chamber beneath the archive. Vayric stood across from them. He no longer looked like a tired council elder. His formal robe had been removed, revealing black ward plates sewn over his coat. 6 corrupted stones floated around him, each pulsing in time with the weakening northern lines. The young assistant lay unconscious near the stair. Vayric had apparently used him to trigger the mechanism, then discarded him. "Your Majesty," Vayric said, "you were not supposed to enter with her." Vaylor rose and placed himself at Seraphine's side. "Your disappointments have become a public service." Seraphine pushed to her feet. "You altered the trench." "Yes." "You corrupted Frostbarrow." "One of several necessary wounds." "Necessary for what?" Vayric looked at her with something worse than hatred. He looked with ownership. "The Crown has controlled the Moon Wards for 400 years. Kings decide which territories receive stone, soldiers, and repair funds. Councils advise and are ignored. I intended to create failures severe enough that the Pax would grant emergency control to us." Vaylor's voice was cold. "You would destroy villages to increase committee authority. Temporary hardship. Workers nearly died. They did not." Seraphine stepped forward. "Because we arrived." "Because you arrived," Vayric corrected. "Mevrian's daughter, carrying the only magic capable of compressing corruption without dispersing it. I believed your mother exaggerated. Then I saw your first sphere." The 6 stones turned toward Seraphine. Her magic answered painfully. Silver light gathered beneath her skin. Vayric smiled. "Every knot you absorb makes your core more useful. Tonight, you will draw the capital's corruption into one sphere. I will remove it, bind it to the council seal, and present myself as the man who restored the wards. And if the sphere crushes you? Seraphine asked. It will obey the seal. My magic does not obey seals. All magic obeys structure. Mine threw the king into a curtain. Valor glanced at her. An important precedent. Varric's expression sharpened. You mistake disorder for freedom. Your strength, your spheres, your public insolence, all of it exists because your mother refused to discipline you into a proper witch. Seraphine felt anger rise. Not because he insulted her. She had heard worse from better people. Because he spoke of Mevrien's love as failure. My mother taught me control, she said. She simply did not teach me obedience to cowards. Varric raised one hand. The corrupted stones struck. Valor shifted before Seraphine could move. Black-silver wolf power spread from him in a curved shield. The first wave broke against it, driving him back one step. Seraphine called her spheres. Nothing came. The ritual chamber walls were lined with iron channels that dragged her magic downward. Silver light formed at her palms and sank into the floor. Varric laughed. Without your little moons, you are only a strong woman in a locked room. Seraphine looked at the stone ceiling. That is still an unfortunate room to share with me. She seized the nearest iron channel and pulled. The metal tore from the floor with a scream. The corrupted stones wavered. Valor drove forward through the next attack, using his shield to force Varric away from the central seal. Seraphine ripped out a second channel and swung it into the third, breaking the pattern. Magic rushed back into her hands. A sphere formed instantly. It was larger than her head and red gold with anger. Varric's smile vanished. Seraphine threw it at the ceiling, not at him. The sphere struck the sealed opening. Stone cracked. Snow and moonlight poured through. Royal guards shouted above. Varric turned toward the stair. Valor caught him by the front of his coat and slammed him against a pillar without drawing blood. You endangered my kingdom. Varric's hand closed around a black stone hidden beneath his collar. Seraphine saw the movement. Valor, down. The king obeyed without hesitation. Seraphine's second sphere crossed the chamber and struck Varric's wrist. The stone flew free. Fenella, leaning through the broken opening above, dropped a map net over it. I brought equipment, she called. Dovrin appeared beside her. You brought my best map net. The kingdom is in danger. That is when one labels borrowed equipment. Even Varric looked offended by their priorities. Guards descended and bound him with silver chains. The young assistant regained consciousness and immediately began confessing. Varric had threatened his family and promised promotion. He knew the locations of 3 hidden corruption chambers beneath the capital. Valor ordered teams to secure them. Seraphine studied the 6 floating stones. Their pulse had not stopped. He already connected them, she said. Dovrin climbed down. Connected them to what? Varric smiled from the chains. A deep bell sounded beneath the city. Not the royal bell, not a temple bell. The old moon warning. Once. Twice. Then all 12 ward lines on Fenella's map turned black. Varric lifted his chin. To everything. Valor's hand tightened on the chain. How do we stop it? You do not. The capital will draw every damaged line inward. By dawn, the moon well will open into a void. Dovrin went pale. If the central well collapses, every pack ward falls with it. Release me, Varric said, and I will guide the council seal. Seraphine walked close enough that he had to look up at her. You built the system around my magic. Around the magic you cannot control. Then you should have spent less time mocking how I use it. She turned to Valor. Take him to the public court. Keep him alive. People need to hear what he did from his own mouth. Where are you going? To the moon well. Then I am going with you. The city needs its king. The city needs its wards. Valor. He stepped close, anger and fear finally visible beneath his control. Do not ask me to watch from safety. Seraphine remembered Frostbarrow. She nodded. Beside me then, not in front. Beside you. They reached Mooncourt Square as the first cracks opened in the sky. Black lines spread across the winter clouds, converging above the central well. The moon disappeared behind a turning circle of darkness. Across the city, wolf howls rose as pack bonds weakened. People flooded into the streets. Valor climbed the well steps and issued orders. Guards opened the palace shelters. Witches raised temporary barriers around homes. Pack leaders moved civilians away from the square. Lucivar arrived in partial armor, Caldrissa beside him. The southern ward is failing, he said. What do you need? Valor looked at Seraphine. She appreciated that. He did not decide her plan for her. Caldrissa, take every flame witch to the eastern roofs, Seraphine said. Do not attack the darkness. Light the streets so people can move safely. Caldrissa nodded. Done. Lucivar, the old bell tunnels connect to the outer packs. You know them better than anyone. Get the children and elders into the stone shelters. Lucivar hesitated. I can fight here. I know. I need you there. He looked as if he wanted to argue, then recognized the trust hidden inside the task. I will do it, he said. He ran. Mevrienne reached the well with Dovrin and Fenella. Her braid had come loose, silver-streaked hair whipping in the wind. The corruption is gathering below the city, she said. Your spheres can contain it, but not one at a time. How many? As many as you can create. I can control 6. You controlled 6 in a trial designed by ordinary witches. This is your shape, Seraphine. Stop measuring it with our limits. Her mother placed both hands around Seraphine's face. I told you when you were 7 that your magic was real. I believed you. Believe me once more. You are ready to discover what it wants to become. The ground shook. A section of the well wall exploded outward. Valor turned, shielding Seraphine and Mevrienne from stone with his armored body. Seraphine raised one hand. A gold sphere formed between them, catching the falling debris in midair. Gold. Not silver blue. Protection had changed its nature. Seraphine looked up at the dark sky. The spheres need different purposes, she said. One kind cannot hold everything. Dovrin opened his notes. Frostbarrow separated corruption from the ward. The trial spheres redirected force. Fenella unrolled her largest map across the ground. The city has 12 ward towers. If you place a sphere over each tower, they can form an outer orbit. Mevrienne pointed to the moon well, and a central sphere here to draw the corruption. 13, Seraphine said. Valor stood at her shoulder. You can do it. She looked at him. You do not know that. No, I know you will try, and I know you will not try alone. The black circle in the sky widened. Seraphine planted her ironwood staff against the stone. She found the center. Not Valor, not herself. The city. The people moving through lit streets. The quarry workers in the north. The villages sharing one bridge. Her mother, who had believed before there was proof. Fenella arguing with maps. Caldrissa choosing courage after choosing badly. Lucivar guiding children through tunnels he once used to hide from bullies. Valor beside her, strong enough not to fear her strength. Protect them. A gold sphere rose over the first ward tower. Then a second. Seraphine's knees shook. Valor placed one hand at her waist. Mevrienne placed a hand between her shoulders. A third sphere formed. Across the square, witches joined hands. Dovrin called tower positions. Fenella adjusted angles on the map. 4, 5. 6. Each sphere floated above a different tower, bright enough to turn night into pale dawn. The void pulled harder. Seraphine tasted iron and cold. Her magic wanted to collapse inward. She remembered every broken wand, every laugh, every child who had said she was not a real witch because her power refused to move like theirs. She stopped asking it to move like theirs. 7 spheres became 8. 8 became 10. The city disappeared behind light. At the eastern roofs, Caldrissa's flame witches raised lines of gold fire that marked safe roads. At the bell tunnels, Lucivar's voice carried orders through the stone. The 11th sphere formed above the southern tower. The 12th rose over the palace. The outer orbit was complete. Now the central sphere. Black magic surged from every street crack toward the moon well. Seraphine drew it upward. The central sphere appeared as a tiny purple point. It grew. And grew. The weight drove Seraphine to one knee. Valor went down with her, arm locked around her middle. "Stay with me. I am here. Tell me what you see." "Your face." "Seraphine, it is still distracting." His grip tightened. "Then keep looking." She laughed once, breathlessly, and the fear loosened. The purple sphere rose above the well, swallowing corruption in dark rivers. It grew larger than the palace dome. The outer gold spheres began to spin. A crown of moons formed above the capital. People stopped in the streets to stare. The void in the clouds pulled against the central sphere. For a moment, both remained suspended, equal forces tearing at the city between them. Seraphine could not hold. Her arms fell. The central sphere dropped 10 feet. Valor's wolf power erupted around them, black, silver, and immense. He did not take control of the sphere. He formed a living shield around Seraphine, absorbing the wind and flying stones so she could concentrate. Mavrienne began an old moon chant. The witches joined her. Dovrin and Fenella anchored the tower map with iron weights. Lucivar returned from the tunnels with the last group of civilians and took position at the southern wardstone. Caldrissa came from the roofs and added a ring of flame beneath the central sphere. Everyone had a role. The choice remained Seraphine's. She stood. Veyric wanted one sphere he could own, she said through clenched teeth. He should have planned for 13 that belonged to no one. She lifted both hands. The gold spheres accelerated. The purple sphere rose. It entered the black circle in the clouds. For one terrible second, darkness covered everything. Then the sphere compressed. The void folded inward around its center, shrinking from a storm to a tower, from a tower to a shield, from a shield to a plum-sized point of purple light. Seraphine closed her fist. The point vanished. Moonlight returned. The 12 gold spheres remained above the city, turning slowly like a crown. Silence spread across the capital. Then the wolves began to howl. Not in fear, in recognition. The sound rose from every street and tower, deep enough to shake snow from the roofs. Seraphine stood at the center of it, held upright by Valor's arm and her mother's hand. "You did it," Mavrienne whispered. Seraphine looked at the moon crown above them. "We did it." "No," her mother said. "We helped. You created something none of us knew how to imagine." Seraphine's vision blurred. She turned toward Valor. His armor was dusted white with powdered stone. A crack crossed one shoulder plate. His face, unfairly, remained perfect. "The face survived," she said. "Your priorities honor me." Her knees gave way. He lifted her into his arms. Seraphine had carried Lucivar countless times. She had never understood how strange it felt to be carried by someone who knew she could walk and chose to ease the burden anyway. "I can stand," she murmured. "I know." People are watching. They watched you carry my brother. Balance must be restored. She rested her head against his shoulder. You are very broad. You have mentioned it. I was correct each time. Rest, witch. That sounded possessive. It was a medical order. She smiled and closed her eyes. When Seraphine woke, sunlight filled a palace chamber. Her mother slept in a chair near the window with a book open on her lap. Fenella lay across a couch under 3 maps. Valor stood at the foot of the bed, speaking quietly with Dovrin. Seraphine opened her eyes and said, "You are all terrible at guarding unconscious people." Mavrian woke instantly. You slept for 14 hours. Then I was excellent at being unconscious. Fenella sat up, maps sliding to the floor. The wards are stable, better than stable. Your gold spheres dissolved at dawn, but each left a rotating core above the towers. Dovrin says the network can now isolate damage instead of spreading it. Dovrin looked offended. I said the evidence suggests that scholars do not announce certainty before breakfast. Vyler came to the bedside. He had changed into a black, high-collared tunic, but the crack in his shoulder armor had left a dark bruise near his collar. Seraphine frowned. You were hurt. A stone object struck me. I have experience with those around you. She reached for him. He sat beside her. Her fingers touched the bruise through the fabric. You should have told me. You were holding the sky together. That is not an excuse. It seemed persuasive at the time. Mavrian stood. Fenella, Dovrin, come with me. Fenella gathered 1 map. Why? Because my daughter is about to either kiss the king or scold him. Both deserve privacy. Mother. The door remains open. They left. Valor looked at Seraphine. Which did you choose? Both. She gripped the front of his tunic and pulled him close. Their third kiss was not cautious, but it remained tender and brief. It carried relief, gratitude, and the clear choice of 2 people who had survived danger without mistaking danger for love. When Seraphine released him, Valor rested his forehead against hers. You pulled a king by his clothing, he said. You were too far away. A sound legal defense. Now the scolding. You do not hide injuries from me. Agreed. And you do not stand in front when we agreed on beside. The wall exploded. Walls are not known for respecting agreements. You should compensate. How? She looked toward the breakfast tray. Bring that closer. Valor obeyed. Courtship has become demanding, he said. You claimed a hungry witch in public. The risks were obvious. Varric's trial began 2 days later. Valor could have held it behind closed doors. Seraphine insisted on the Great Hall. The same packs that watched her rejection deserved to hear how their wards had been endangered. The quarry workers sent written testimony. The village leaders described lost crops. Caldrissa produced the debt contracts Varric had used to control her family. The young assistant testified under protection. Varric denied nothing. He argued that the council deserved greater power and that temporary suffering would have produced necessary reform. Seraphine stood before him in a dark blue gown, her ironwood staff in one hand and a small gold sphere hovering above the other. You are strong, Varric told her, because I forced you to become strong. The hall reacted with disgust. Seraphine did not. No, she said. My mother taught me. I trained. My friends helped. The king stood beside me. The workers at Frostbarrow trusted me. Caldrissa chose to speak. Lucivar carried people to safety. You created harm. Do not steal credit for what others built while repairing it. Varric's face finally changed. He had expected hatred. He had not expected to be made irrelevant. The council voted unanimously to strip him of rank and property. Because his plan had knowingly risked thousands of lives and included treason against the crown, the royal judges sentenced him to death under kingdom law. No punishment was carried out in public. His seized estates were divided among the damaged northern villages and the capital shelters. The assistants who had acted under threat received labor sentences repairing the wards they had helped damage. Those who had volunteered for the conspiracy lost titles and wealth. Caldrissa's family lands were restored only after an independent review. She did not return to Lucivar's side. Instead, she accepted a position leading the capital's emergency flame wardens. "I do not expect friendship," she told Seraphine after the trial, "but I would like the chance to become someone you do not regret defending." Seraphine considered her. "Report to Frostbarrow in spring. Isabet needs flame channels cut through the eastern quarry." Caldrissa looked alarmed. "Is that forgiveness?" "It is labor. Forgiveness may develop while you are carrying stone." "I am not very strong." "You will be." For the first time, Caldrissa smiled without calculation. "Fair." Lucivar requested a private meeting a week later. Seraphine agreed to meet him in the old Bell courtyard, where he had once fastened his grandmother's pearl clasp at her throat. Winter sunlight lay across the stones. The fountain she had repaired as a child still stood in the corner. One carved wolf leaned slightly because 11-year-old Seraphine had refused to wait for a mason. Lucivar arrived without royal colors. He looked as handsome as ever. Seraphine noticed because honesty did not require blindness. She simply no longer confused beauty with safety. "The southern children reached the shelter," he said. "All of them." "I heard. You did well." He looked down. "I kept thinking of the blizzard when you carried me to the healers. You complained the entire way." "My boots were wet." "You were unconscious for half of it and still complained." A faint smile appeared, then vanished. "I loved you." Seraphine's chest tightened, but the pain no longer controlled her breathing. "I know. Part of me still does." "I know that too." "Then how can you choose him so quickly?" She looked at the leaning stone wolf. "I did not choose him in one morning. I accepted the chance to know him. Then he kept making choices that allowed love to grow. I could do that now." "Perhaps you can, for someone else." Lucivar closed his eyes. "I was afraid. The council said the southern packs would never accept you. They said your failures would become mine. Caldrissa's magic was visible, easy. I understand why you were afraid." Hope entered his face. Seraphine continued, "Understanding is not returning." The hope disappeared. "Was everything between us worthless?" he asked. "No, that is why it hurt." She stepped closer and placed the crooked stone wolf charm she had made for him as a child into his hand. He had returned it after the ceremony, but she had carried it since. "You were my first love," she said. "I do not need to make you a monster in order to leave you. You were kind many times. You were brave many times. You also abandoned me when choosing me required courage. All of those things are true." His fingers closed around the charm. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I believe you. Will you forgive me?" "One day, perhaps completely. Today, enough to hope you become better, not enough to become yours." Tears shone in his gray eyes. Seraphine's old instinct urged her to hold him until he stopped hurting. She did not obey it. Compassion did not require resuming the role that had emptied her. Lucivar drew a slow breath. "He has loved you a long time." "He told you?" "He did not need to. He looked at you that way even when we were young. I thought he was watching me." Seraphine laughed softly. "You have always been very confident about your face. You encouraged it. That was one of my mistakes." He laughed too, though tears remained. They parted without bitterness, but not without consequence. Lucivar left for the southern territories the next morning. He remained Alpha, but the council stripped away the special succession advantage he had pursued. He would have to earn his people's trust without borrowing Seraphine's strength or Caldrissa's magic. Seraphine watched his carriage leave from the palace wall. Valor joined her but said nothing. He apologized, she said. Did it help? Yes, it also hurt. Both can be true. She looked at him. You have been speaking to my mother. She provides excellent instruction and terrifying tea. Were you worried I would choose him? Yes. The immediate answer surprised her. You admitted jealousy. I admitted fear. They are related, but not identical. What would you have done? Accepted your choice, hated it privately, assigned him every bridge in the kingdom. Seraphine laughed and leaned against his side. His arm came around her shoulders. I did not choose him, she said. I noticed. Do not become smug. The crown remains responsible. Before spring reached the capital, Seraphine returned with Mavrian to the Bramblevain house for the first time since the rejection. The house stood at the edge of the old Coven district, built from dark stone and thick oak beams. Its kitchen ceiling still carried a round dent from Seraphine's first attempt at a levitation spell. The spell had not lifted the apple she was aiming at. It had condensed into a heavy sphere beneath the table and launched the table upward instead. Mavrian had never repaired the dent. It is educational, she always said. Vyler insisted on accompanying them with only 4 guards. He said the weakened wards still required caution. Seraphine suspected he also wanted to inspect the place where she had grown up. He entered the kitchen and looked at the ceiling. Your magic had ambition, he said. The table had poor balance. You blamed the furniture at 8? Mother taught me to examine all possible causes. Mavrian set a kettle over the fire. She also blamed the floor, the apple, and the season. Winter magic behaves differently, Seraphine said. It was summer. Valor removed his cloak and hung it from the old iron hook. The hook bent. Seraphine caught the cloak before it fell. The king is too heavy for the house, she said. The cloak contains armor plates. An excuse. A documented fact. Mavrian handed him a hammer. Then document a stronger hook. The Alpha King of 12 Packs spent the next half hour repairing the kitchen wall while Seraphine made tea. 2 of the guards stood outside the window trying not to look entertained. Valor drove the final iron brace into place. Your mother gives orders as if she owns the crown. She does not need the crown, Seraphine said. People obey because they value continued breathing. Mavrian poured the tea. Correct. A knock came at the front door. 3 adults waited outside, a broad-shouldered miller named Petavar, his sister Lyrienne, and a red-haired blacksmith called Hadric. Seraphine recognized them immediately. As children, they had been the most persistent members of the group who mocked Lucivar and later mocked her failed magic. Petavar had once put Lucivar into a feed barrel. Seraphine had put Petavar through the side of that barrel. He looked at Valor behind her and nearly forgot how to speak. Lady Seraphine, he began, Your Majesty, Great Witch. Mavrian folded her arms. You may choose fewer titles and reach the purpose faster. Lyrienne held out a covered basket. We came to apologize. Seraphine looked at the basket. Is the apology baked? Partly. Promising. Come inside. They sat around the old kitchen table, which had been reinforced so many times that it contained more iron than wood. Petavar placed both hands around his cup. When the moon crown appeared over the city, he said, my youngest daughter asked whether the witch who made it was the same girl I used to call an empty wand. Seraphine waited. I told her yes. She asked why I had called you, that if your magic was only different. I did not have an answer that made me look decent. That does limit the available answers, Valor said. Petavar swallowed. Seraphine touched Valor's knee beneath the table, a silent request to allow the conversation to continue without royal pressure. The king leaned back. Lyrienne spoke next. "We did not believe your mother. We thought she was protecting you because she was famous and proud. Every time you explained, we laughed harder." "I remember," Seraphine said. "Then you stopped explaining and started challenging people in the yard." "Also true." Hadrick rubbed one shoulder as if an old memory still ached. "You threw me into a hedge. You cut my training rope." "I did. The hedge was fair." Petivar looked toward Mavrian. "You always stood behind her. We told ourselves you encouraged violence." Mavrian's eyes cooled. "I encouraged consequences. Seraphine received them when she began a fight. So did anyone who began one with her. You disliked the second part." "Yes," he admitted. The direct answer softened something in the room. Seraphine opened the basket. Inside were moon-shaped cakes, one of them flattened on one side. "Why is this one damaged?" she asked. Lyrienne looked embarrassed. "My daughter tried to make it float. It struck the wall." Seraphine smiled. "Does she want help?" "After the way I treated you?" "Your daughter did not treat me any way." Lyrienne's eyes filled. "She is 10. Her magic makes square flames. The academy teachers keep telling her fire should rise in points, not corners. She has begun hiding her hands." Seraphine set down the cake. The apology mattered. The child mattered more. "Bring her to the new school when it opens," she said, "and tell her not to flatten the corners before I see them." Lyrienne covered her mouth. Petivar said, "You forgive us?" "I accept that you are ashamed and trying to change. Forgiveness is not a gate that opens once. It is more like rebuilding this table. Many braces, repeated work." Valor examined the table. "This object has survived admirably." "It learned after the ceiling incident," Seraphine said. Hadrick pushed the basket closer. "There are 12 cakes. That is an excellent first brace." They stayed until the tea was gone. Before leaving, Petivar offered to supply timber for the ward school. Hadrick promised iron sphere cradles at cost. Lyrienne wrote her daughter's name on a scrap of paper and gave it to Seraphine as carefully as if she were handing over a treasure. When the door closed, Seraphine remained beside it. "Are you well?" Valor asked. "I thought an apology would make the old years disappear." Mavrienne came to her side. "Did Lucivar's apology make your love disappear?" "No." "Then why would theirs erase pain? An apology does not rewrite memory. It changes what may be built after it." Seraphine leaned her head against her mother's shoulder, as she had done after childhood fights. "You never doubted me," she said. "I doubted your explanations for broken household objects." "Not my magic." "Never your magic." Valor stood nearby, giving them space without leaving. Seraphine reached one hand toward him. He took it and stepped closer, forming a small circle in the old kitchen. Mother, daughter, and the man who had not replaced the first person who believed in her, but had joined her. That evening, snow trapped them at the Bramblevane house. The royal guards occupied the front room. Valor was given the narrow guest bed upstairs. Seraphine slept in her childhood room across the hall, where old training diagrams covered the walls. After midnight, she woke to a crash. She seized a wooden practice staff and opened the door. Valor stood in the corridor holding one half of the guest bed frame. The other half had collapsed beneath the mattress. They stared at each other. "The king is too heavy for the house," Seraphine said. The frame was old. A documented excuse. Mavrienne opened her door, took in the broken bed, and sighed. "Now I understand why you two suit each other." "I did not break it intentionally," Valor said. Neither did she, most of the time. They moved the mattress to the floor. Seraphine lifted one end while Valor took the other. "I can carry it," he said. I know. Then why are you helping? She recognized the echo of his own words at Frostbarrow. Because you are carrying it. His gaze warmed. Mevrian pointed toward the guest room. Continue that emotional exchange inside. Some of us value sleep. Seraphine laughed and helped settle the mattress. At the doorway, Valor touched her wrist. Stay one moment. The door remains open. She stayed. Moonlight entered through the small window, silvering the plain room. Without armor, crown, or court, Valor looked younger. Still formidable, but not distant. This house explains you, he said. The broken ceiling? The reinforced table, the repaired fountain outside. Your mother's refusal to replace evidence of failure when it could become evidence of learning. Seraphine looked toward the hall where Mevrian's door had closed. She made it easy to believe her. No, she made it safe to keep trying. Belief was still your work. That distinction mattered. Seraphine sat on the edge of the mattress. When people laughed, I knew Mother was right, but sometimes knowing did not stop it from hurting. Vylar sat beside her, leaving respectful space. Confidence is not the absence of pain. You sound like her again. She threatens me with tea until I learn. Seraphine smiled. Were you ever mocked as a child? Not often. I was large early. Of course you were. I was feared instead. My father praised that. He believed a king should be difficult to love and impossible to challenge. Do you? No, fear can enforce silence. It cannot create loyalty. She studied his face in the moonlight. Was that why you stayed away when I chose Lucivar? Partly. I did not want my rank to turn interest into pressure. Partly, I believed you loved him well and that he would eventually deserve it. You were wrong. Painfully. For me. For both of us, though not equally. He did not center himself in her wound. He simply admitted that watching had cost him something. Seraphine shifted closer until their shoulders touched. I am glad you came home when you did, she said. So am I. I am also glad I carried Lucivar outside before you intervened. I would never have denied you that pleasure. Good. It was important to my healing. Valor turned his hand palm up between them. Seraphine laid hers over it. They sat quietly until the house stopped creaking in the wind. When she rose to leave, he brought her knuckles to his lips. Good night, Seraphine. Good night, Valor. Try not to break the floor. The floor appears strong. That is what the bed believed. The next morning, Mevrian made Valor repair the frame before breakfast. The Alpha King worked with hammer and iron braces while Seraphine ate 2 apology cakes and offered unhelpful advice. For once, no one in the house needed her to lift the burden. She chose to help anyway. Spring came slowly to the capital. Seraphine spent the last winter months building a new ward school with Mevrian, Dovrin, and Fenella. The school did not teach other witches to copy sphere magic. No one else possessed the same dense core. It taught them to identify the natural shape of their power before forcing it into traditional forms. Children who had been called slow, strange, or unpromising came from every pack. Seraphine trained them in the mornings and refused to spend every afternoon working. Valor insisted on this with unusual firmness. You saved the kingdom, he said. You are allowed to eat cakes in the garden. Is that a royal order? Yes. Tyranny at last. History will understand. She learned to enjoy the life she had once postponed while waiting for Lucivar's promise. She attended winter plays, chose gowns with reinforced pockets for small spheres, and allowed the palace cooks to create a dessert shaped like the moon crown. The first attempt collapsed through the serving tray. The second was made of lighter cake. At Frostbarrow, Caldrisa spent 6 weeks cutting flame channels and developed strong arms, a practical temper, and an unexpected friendship with Isabet. Captain Odrin sent Seraphine a formal report stating that all bridges had been counted twice, and remained jealous-proof. Valor reassigned him to no further infrastructure. Growth, Seraphine praised. Administrative completion, Valor corrected. Fenella became deputy ward master. She labeled every map net after Dovran threatened to lock the supply cabinet. Mevrian accepted a seat on the Crown Council only after Seraphine made Valor promise that meetings would contain fewer men at long tables. How? He asked. Shorter tables. He ordered round ones. The kingdom adjusted to the sight of its Alpha King being openly courted by a witch who could carry him. That rumor began after a training accident in which a practice tower collapsed. Valor pushed Seraphine clear, injured his ankle, and attempted to walk back to the palace. She watched him limp for 3 steps. Then she lifted him into her arms. The royal guards looked away with heroic discipline. "Put me down," Valor said. "Inside the palace?" He recognized the question. That detail was not specified. Seraphine carried him across the entire courtyard while servants applauded. Valor endured it with dignity until Odran, visiting from Frostbarrow, called, "Very elegant, King." Valor assigned him one final bridge. At the beginning of summer, the 12-pack leaders returned to the Hall of 12 Moons. This time, there was no trial and no rejection ceremony. The moon crown cores glowed above the city towers. The repaired black throne stood on the dais, though Lucivar's ceremonial chair had been moved permanently to the outer landing as a public bench. Citizens often sat in it to eat chair-shaped bread. Seraphine entered beside her mother. She wore a full, high-collared gown of deep blue velvet reinforced with silver thread. Her thick, dark hair flowed past her hips, braided away from her face and decorated with small moonstone pins. No fragile wand hung at her belt. She carried her ironwood staff, and 3 small spheres moved quietly around her shoulders. Valor waited before the throne in black and silver. He had not announced what he intended to ask. He had requested only that she come willing to make a public choice. The symmetry was not lost on anyone. He descended the dais and stopped before her. "Seraphine Bramblevain," he said, "when my brother rejected you in this hall, I claimed the right to court you. I did not claim your future." The court listened in complete silence. "You have protected this kingdom with strength, magic, judgment, and a refusal to permit fools to remain comfortable. You have stood beside me when I was king and when I was merely a heavy man near a collapsing quarry." Seraphine's mouth twitched. Valor continued, "I ask you now, before the same packs that once mocked you, whether you choose to become my mate and queen." He held out his hand. Seraphine looked around the hall. Caldrissa stood with the Flame Wardens, wearing practical crimson and smiling. Fenella held a map she had been forbidden to bring to the ceremony. Dovran stood beside her, pretending not to notice. Odrin represented Frostbarrow. Mavrian watched her daughter with pride and no surprise. Lucivar was not present. His absence did not create a hole in the room. Seraphine looked at Valor. His face remained a remarkable argument. His body, fully clothed in formal black, remained equally persuasive. But those were no longer the reasons her heart moved toward him. She remembered him stepping to her side instead of in front. She remembered his hand anchoring her magic without directing it. She remembered that he had loved her quietly while respecting her choice to love someone else. She remembered that he could carry power without demanding that everyone around him become smaller. "I choose you," she said. The hall erupted. Valor's composure broke into a real smile. Seraphine pointed one finger at him. "With conditions." The hall quieted again. "Naturally," he said. "The ward school remains independent. My mother may criticize the crown without punishment. Fenella receives a larger map budget. Caldrissa's Flame Wardens answer to emergency law, not noble families. And no man who speaks to me is assigned sewer inspection merely for being handsome." Valor glanced at Odrin. "The last condition is dangerously broad. Accept it." Very well, they will be assigned bridges instead. Valor. I accept all conditions. Mevrian called from behind Seraphine, add cake in the garden twice a week. Mother. Queens require rest. Valor nodded solemnly. The crown agrees. Seraphine looked between them. This alliance is becoming oppressive. Do you withdraw? Valor asked. She stepped closer. No. He fastened the royal moon clasp at her shoulder. Unlike Lucivar's pearl, it did not signify a future someone else controlled. Valor had asked. She had answered. The three spheres around Seraphine rose and circled them both. Valor lowered his voice. May I kiss my chosen queen? You may kiss the woman who chose you. The title is secondary. He kissed her gently before the entire kingdom. The court cheered. The wolves howled. One of Seraphine's spheres became distracted and rolled down the dais, collecting 6 ceremonial cushions and Counselor Dovrin's shoe before Fenella trapped it beneath a map net. Label that net, Dovrin shouted. Seraphine began laughing against Valor's shoulder. The ceremony became less dignified from there. It became much happier. Seraphine did not become her mother. She did not become the quiet Luna Lucivar's council had imagined, or the grateful, rejected woman the court expected Valor to rescue. She became the first Moon Core Queen, the creator of the Crown Sphere Wards, a woman strong enough to carry a throne and wise enough to know when not to throw it. Valor remained the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. He protected her fiercely, loved her with restraint and certainty, and continued to deny jealousy while maintaining suspiciously accurate bridge records. Mavrienne continued to defend her daughter, though she no longer needed to stand in front of her. Most often, she stood nearby with tea and legal advice. Lucivar became a better alpha in the south. Regret followed him for years, but he learned not to turn regret into another demand upon Seraphine. He honored what they had been by finally accepting what they would never be again. Caldrissa rebuilt her family lands through work rather than marriage and became one of the kingdom's most trusted emergency wardens. Fenella filled the new school with maps. Odren counted no more bridges unless the bridges genuinely required it. And on quiet afternoons, when Seraphine sat in the palace garden eating cake under royal order, she sometimes looked across the roses at Valor reading council reports. He always noticed. Again? He would ask. The face remains reliable. And the man? She would call a small gold sphere into her palm and send it floating toward him. It would settle above his hand, steady and warm. Also reliable, she would say. Then the Alpha King would leave his reports, come sit beside his queen, and make certain she remembered that a woman did not have to earn love by carrying everyone alone. Sometimes love began with a rescue. Sometimes it began with a choice. And sometimes it began when a heartbroken witch carried the wrong prince outside and finally noticed the right king standing in the doorway. Their private life developed its own pattern. Valor woke before dawn because kings had an unreasonable number of reports. Seraphine woke before dawn because her mother had trained her to believe the day was already judging anyone who remained in bed after sunrise. They met in the small western dining room, where Seraphine ate enough breakfast for 2 soldiers, and Valor pretended not to notice when she stole the best piece of honey bread from his plate. He always placed it there for her. She always pretended to steal it. On quiet evenings, they trained together in the Mooncore chamber. Seraphine's spheres had become more precise. She could build a ring of gold light around Valor without touching his armor, send a silver sphere through a sequence of moving iron gates, and pull a purple sphere back from a curse before it absorbed too much darkness. Valor remained her strongest anchor, though he no longer needed to stand within arm's reach. His presence settled the wolf part of the magic. His voice gave her a direction when the spheres multiplied too quickly. Sometimes, however, he stepped close simply because he liked standing close. Seraphine knew the difference. That one was stable. she told him one night when he placed both hands around her waist from behind. I agree. Then this is not anchoring. No, it is distracting. You have survived worse threats. She leaned back against his armored chest. Not many with shoulders like yours. His mouth touched her temple in a restrained kiss. Continue training, my queen. Cruel man. You married me after a full investigation. The investigation was compromised by your face. I submitted all relevant evidence. The first sign that something had changed came during a spring council meeting. Seraphine was listening to Fenella explain a new system of emergency ward maps when the room tilted slightly to the left. It corrected itself before anyone else appeared to notice. She continued listening. Then the scent of roasted onions from the kitchens reached the chamber. Seraphine had always liked roasted onions. She had once crossed a flooded courtyard to rescue a tray of them. That morning, the smell seemed like a personal insult. Her gold sphere, which had been hovering politely near the ceiling, dropped 6 inches. Fenella stopped speaking. Your Majesty? The onions have betrayed me. Everyone looked toward the doors. Valor rose so quickly his chair struck the wall. Seraphine held up one hand. I am not dying. His eyes had already changed, silver wolf light sharpening through the dark. You do not know that. I know that death usually feels more dramatic. Mavrienne, seated beside Fenella, observed her daughter for several quiet seconds. Then she asked, when did you last eat? At breakfast. How much? The normal amount. Valor said, she left half the honey bread. The chamber became silent. Seraphine looked at him. You noticed that? You have never left honey bread in the 11 years I have observed you. Fenella slowly lowered her map. Dovrin, who had attended to discuss the palace wards, began gathering his instruments as though expecting an explosion. Mavrienne stood. We are ending the meeting. Mother, I became dizzy for one moment. And abandoned honey bread. That sounds serious when everyone repeats it.